You know, sometimes when you look in the mirror, it's not just your reflection staring back. It's the sum of every decision, every heartbreak, every quiet victory, and every scar that life's handed you. Most of us don't stop long enough to really see that person. We rush past, we criticize, we compare, we forget that the person in that mirror has been with us through everything. And yet we rarely say, hey, I love you. Thanks for sticking around. Today I want to talk about something we all forget to do. Falling in love with the person you see in the mirror, because the truth is that love is where everything else begins. You ever notice how we try to skip over the parts of our lives that don't look pretty? We edit our own stories like we're afraid someone might read the truth. We hide the messy chapters, the heartbreak, the mistakes, the nights we didn't think we'd make it through. But here's the thing. Those are the chapters that made you. Those are the pages that gave you depth. Without them, the story wouldn't mean anything. I used to think life was supposed to look like a straight line, start here, work hard, be good, keep moving up, but life's not like that. It's crooked, it bends and twists, it throws you into walls and then hands you a reason to stand again. And somehow it's all connected. Every detour, every broken moment, every goodbye you didn't want to say, it's part of your becoming. You can't edit out your pain and expect to find peace. The truth is, your story needs every chapter, especially the ones that nearly broke you, because those pages taught you empathy, they taught you resilience, they taught you how to appreciate the light because you've known the dark. When you start to accept your story, every single part of it, something shifts inside you. You stop running, you stop pretending, you start breathing again. Acceptance isn't about approval. It's not saying, yeah, I loved that awful thing that happened. It's saying it happened, and I'm still here. It's realizing that you've already survived every bad day you've ever had. That's not small, that's strength. I remember meeting someone once, a woman who had been through hell. She lost her job, her marriage ended, her health was falling apart. She told me, I feel like my story's over. But when she talked, her eyes had this quiet fire. She didn't see it, but it was there. I said to her, maybe the story you thought was ending is just changing chapters. 6 months later, she was working at a small nonprofit, helping people rebuild their lives. She found meaning again. The pain didn't disappear. It transformed. Sometimes that's what acceptance does. It doesn't erase the past, it redefines it. There's something powerful about scars. We tend to hide them, cover them up, but they're proof that we healed. They're proof that we kept going. Every scar is a sentence in your story that says, I made it through. The Japanese have this art called kintsugi. When pottery breaks, they don't throw it away. They repair it with gold. They don't hide the cracks, they highlight them. Because they believe something becomes more beautiful because it was broken. That's how your life works too. Your cracks, your flaws, your broken pieces, they're the gold lines in your story. They don't ruin you, they make you one of a kind. You know what's wild? The stories that inspire us most are never the ones about people who had it easy. We don't watch movies or read books about someone who just coasted through life. We love stories about redemption, about people who fell and got back up. We love the human spirit. Raw, imperfect, unfiltered. So why do we think our stories need to be flawless? It's okay to have pages that you're not proud of. It's okay to have parts that still hurt when you read them. Acceptance doesn't mean forgetting, it means understanding. It means saying, yeah, that happened, and it shaped me. You're not defined by what broke you, you're defined by how you kept walking. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop fighting your own history, when you stop wishing your story was someone else's. I once met an old man in a diner, one of those small-town places where the coffee never stops flowing. He was in his late 70s, sitting alone, flipping through a notebook filled with handwriting. I asked what he was working on, and he said, just writing my story down. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, but if I don't write them, it's like they never happened, and I need to own them before I go. That line stayed with me. I need to own them before I go. That's acceptance. That's courage. Sometimes we carry so much shame for the things we've done, or the things that were done to us, that we build walls just to survive. But those walls don't protect you forever. They just keep you from seeing who you've become. When you start accepting your story, those walls start to crumble, and what's left is something honest, something real. It's not easy, I know. There will be moments when you look back and think, I wish I could rewrite that, but maybe you don't need to rewrite it. Maybe you just need to read it differently. Instead of seeing failure, see growth. Instead of regret, see experience. Instead of pain, see proof that you were alive, that you felt deeply enough to be hurt. One night, not long ago, I was walking home through the city. It was late, cold. The streets were empty except for a few lights flickering in windows. I passed by this mirror in a shop window, and for some reason I stopped. I looked at my reflection and just thought about everything. The things I've lost, the people I miss, the mistakes that still sting a little. And I realized I didn't hate that reflection anymore. I didn't want to change it. I just felt this quiet sense of gratitude. Because even though the story hasn't always been easy, it's mine and it's honest. That's what I want for you. To look in that mirror and see someone who's been through things but didn't let them win. To see someone who kept showing up. To see someone who deserves love, not in spite of their story, but because of it. You don't need to erase your past to love who you are. You just need to stop judging it. Every chapter was necessary, even the ones that felt like endings were just beginnings in disguise. Life has this strange way of making sense in reverse. You only understand the meaning when you've already turned the page. So maybe tonight, take a moment. Think about the version of you who made it through every hard day, every heartbreak, every storm. Thank them, because they got you here. That's not nothing. That's everything. Your story is still being written. And maybe one day, when someone else is lost or afraid, they'll read your story. The whole story, not the polished one, and find the courage to keep going. That's why you can't skip chapters. Someone out there needs to know how you got through yours. So don't hide your story. Don't shrink from it. Don't wish it away. Own it. Live it. Tell it, because the person you're becoming depends on every page you've already written. You ever notice how easy it is to look at someone else's life and feel like you're falling behind? We do it without even realizing. You see a friend buy a house, someone else getting married, another person launching a business, and suddenly you're asking yourself, what am I doing wrong? It's like we carry around invisible rulers, and every time we see someone doing something, we hold it up against ourselves to measure where we fall short. But here's the truth. That ruler doesn't belong to you. It never did. You can't measure your worth using someone else's numbers, because your life, your path, it's not supposed to look like anyone else's. It's yours. Completely messy, beautiful, unpredictable, unfinished. There was this guy I used to know who spent most of his 20s trying to catch up. He'd say, everyone's passing me by. I'm behind. Behind what, though? Behind who? He was so caught up in comparing that he forgot to actually live his own story. He took jobs he didn't care about just to look successful. He said yes to people he didn't even like, just to seem included. And every time he looked in the mirror, he felt smaller, because every decision was made with someone else's ruler in his hand. Years later, he walked away from all of it, sold his car, quit his job, moved to a smaller place. He started painting something he loved when he was younger, but had given up because it didn't make sense. A year after that, one of his paintings ended up in a local gallery. And I remember he said, for the first time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. He wasn't rich, he wasn't ahead, but he was at peace. That's what happens when you stop measuring and start living. The world we live in makes comparison so easy. It's almost impossible to avoid. Social media feeds are like highlight reels of everyone else's best moments. Vacations, promotions, new relationships. It's all there, perfectly filtered, perfectly timed. But behind every post is a whole story you can't see. The arguments, the doubts, the nights they couldn't sleep, the years they questioned everything. Nobody uploads that part. We look at the surface and think they've got it all figured out. But the truth is, everyone's fighting their own battles. Everyone's carrying something invisible. And the more we compare, the more we forget that we're only seeing the version of people they want us to see. It's like walking into a bookstore, seeing someone else's chapter 20 and feeling bad that you're still on chapter 5. You can't compare stories when you're not reading the same book. You can't measure your timing against someone else's journey because you don't know what it took for them to get there or where they're heading next. I once read a study from Stanford about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. People who focus on their own growth versus those driven by comparison. The ones who measured progress by personal growth, by effort, by the satisfaction of improving, not only performed better but reported being happier. Because when your reason for doing something comes from inside, you stop chasing validation and start building meaning. And maybe that's what we're all missing sometimes. Meaning, we chase titles, milestones, likes, applause. We think once I have that, I'll feel good. But then we get it and the feeling fades. It always does, because the finish line keeps moving. That's the trap of comparison. It never ends. There's always someone doing more, owning more, looking better, moving faster. But what if you just stopped? What if you took that ruler and broke it in half? What if you started asking a different question? Not am I ahead, but am I becoming who I want to be? Think about it. Maybe your pace isn't slow. Maybe it's steady. Maybe you're not lost. You're just growing roots. Not everything blooms fast. Some of the strongest things in life, the trees that survive storms, the friendships that last decades, the confidence that doesn't crumble, those things take time. You're not behind. You're just building something that lasts. I remember talking with an old friend one night. We were sitting outside a cafe, the kind of place where time slows down. He looked at me and said, I thought by now I'd have it all figured out. I laughed and said, yeah, me too. But then we both just sat there quiet for a bit and he said, maybe figuring it out isn't the point. That hit me. Because maybe it isn't, maybe life isn't about reaching some perfect version of yourself before time runs out. Maybe it's about showing up, learning, stumbling, getting up again, and realizing that even if it doesn't look like anyone else's journey, it's still yours, and that's enough. You don't need to run someone else's race. You just need to take your next step. There's this quote I love. It says, comparison is the thief of joy, but it's also the thief of gratitude. When you're busy looking at what others have, you stop noticing what's already in your hands, the people who love you, the small moments that make your day better, the quiet progress that no one else sees but still matters, the laughter that isn't posted anywhere, the peace that can't be measured by likes or awards. When you live by your own measure, you start to see life differently. Success stops being a scoreboard. It becomes a feeling. It's not about how much you have, but how much you've grown. Not about who's ahead, but how far you've come. There's power in slowing down and saying, I don't need to catch up. I'm exactly where I need to be. You start to make choices for yourself, not to impress anyone. You start saying no to things that drain you and yes to things that feed your soul. You stop apologizing for not fitting into someone else's idea of enough. You start trusting your own rhythm. And here's something I've learned. The world responds to that kind of authenticity. When you stop pretending, people feel it. When you stop comparing, you start connecting. Because there's something magnetic about someone who's comfortable in their own skin. They don't need to compete. They don't need to prove anything. They just are. That's what peace looks like. So maybe today you can let go of that ruler, the one that's been whispering, you're behind, the one that tells you you're not enough until you're more like someone else. Because that voice, it's lying. You're not behind. You're just becoming, and your timing isn't late. It's yours. Everyone blooms differently. Some in the spring, some in the fall. Some take years to grow roots deep enough to hold, but when they do, they stand firm. So take your time, walk your path, trust your process. The only person you need to be better than is who you were yesterday. And if today you're even a little bit kinder, a little bit stronger, a little more patient with yourself, that's progress. And that's worth more than anything someone else's ruler could ever measure. Forgiveness is one of those words that sounds simple until you try to do it. We like to think forgiveness is something we give to others, to the ones who hurt us, who lied, who left. But the hardest person to forgive is the one staring back in the mirror, the person who's lived through every bad choice, every regret, every quiet moment when we whispered, I should have known better. We all have a list, mistakes that still echo in the back of our minds, things we said when we were angry, things we didn't say when we should have, moments when fear made us small or pride made us cruel. And we carry that weight like it's penance, like holding on to it somehow makes it right. But it doesn't, it just keeps us stuck, reliving the same moment over and over again, hoping it'll hurt less the next time we remember it. You can't move forward if you're still punishing the person you used to be. You can't build a life while holding yourself hostage to the past. Forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about freeing yourself from the constant replay of it. There was a time when I couldn't forgive myself for something small but heavy. I'd hurt someone I cared about, not intentionally but enough to leave a mark. And even after they forgave me, I didn't. Every time I thought about it, that same guilt would hit like a wave. One night I found myself sitting alone, staring at my reflection, and I said out loud, "I'm sorry." It felt strange, but then I said, "I forgive you." It felt even stranger, awkward, almost uncomfortable, but it was real. It was the first time I realized forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a practice. You have to keep choosing, and until you start to believe it. We expect forgiveness to feel like a light switch, instant relief, but most of the time it's more like sunrise, slow, gradual. You barely notice it at first, but one morning you realize it's not dark anymore. There's a part of us that believes if we forgive ourselves, it means we're letting ourselves off the hook, like we're saying it's okay that I hurt someone, or it's okay that I failed. But forgiveness isn't permission, it's recognition. It's saying, I see the damage, I understand it, and I choose not to carry the pain forever. That's courage, not weakness. I once met a man who had spent years trying to make up for something he did in his youth. He'd been reckless, made a decision that hurt his family deeply. Decades later, he was still trying to make it right. I asked him, "Do you think you've done enough to forgive yourself?" He smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. He said, "No matter what I do, I still see that version of me." And that's the thing. We freeze ourselves in time. We hold on to the worst version of who we were and forget that we've changed since then. We're not the same people we were 5 years ago, or even 5 months ago. Life doesn't stay still, so why do we insist on keeping our guilt alive like a living thing? Forgiving the reflection means acknowledging that you've grown, that you've learned, that the person who made those choices did so with the knowledge and strength they had at the time. Maybe it wasn't enough, but it was all they knew. You wouldn't judge a child for stumbling when they're learning to walk. So why do you judge yourself for stumbling through life while learning to be human? Self-forgiveness also means understanding that healing takes time, and sometimes the world doesn't give you closure. You might never get an apology from the person you hurt. You might never fix what was broken, but you can still forgive yourself for being human. There's something deeply powerful about being able to look in the mirror and say, you did the best you could with what you had, because honestly, that's all any of us are doing, trying, failing, learning, trying again. There's a story about a woman who spent years writing letters to herself. Every time she felt guilt for something, she'd write it down in a letter addressed to the me who didn't know better. She'd write about what happened, what she felt, what she learned, then she'd burn the letter. She said it wasn't about forgetting, it was about releasing. She realized that forgiving herself didn't mean pretending it never happened. It meant no longer letting it define her. That's the beauty of forgiveness. It creates space. Space for new experiences, new joy, new love. When you carry guilt, there's no room for anything else. It sits heavy on your chest and colors everything you do. But the moment you forgive yourself, you breathe differently. You see possibilities again. You start living instead of replaying. The mind is good at remembering pain, but the heart is good at healing it. You just have to let it. You just have to stop reopening the wound every time you see your reflection. The truth is, you deserve the same compassion you give everyone else. You wouldn't tell your friend they're unworthy because they made a mistake. You wouldn't tell someone they're broken beyond repair. So why do you tell that to yourself? Forgiveness doesn't come from ego. It comes from empathy. It's about understanding the context of your own humanity. Sometimes you acted out of fear. Sometimes you reacted out of hurt. Sometimes you were just lost. And that's okay, we all are. At some point, the goal isn't to erase those moments, but to learn from them so you don't repeat them. And maybe, just maybe, forgiveness is what allows you to finally start over, to wake up one morning and feel lighter, even if you can't explain why, to see your reflection and not flinch, to smile not because everything's perfect, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. You can't hate yourself into becoming someone you love. That's the trap so many of us fall into. We think if we're hard enough on ourselves, we'll change. But shame doesn't heal. It corrodes. It builds walls where bridges could be. Forgiveness is the bridge. It's the choice to walk toward yourself instead of away. It's funny. When you start forgiving yourself, other things begin to shift too. The people around you feel it. The way you show up changes. You stop needing to prove your worth because you finally believe you have it. You stop chasing perfection because you realize peace was what you were chasing all along. I think deep down most people don't need to be told how to forgive. They just need permission to believe they're allowed to. So if you need someone to say it, here it is. You're allowed to forgive yourself for not knowing, for not being ready, for not being perfect. You're allowed to forgive yourself for surviving in the only way you knew how. And maybe that's where it begins. Not with a grand declaration, not with a single moment of clarity, but with a whisper, a small, quiet voice that says, I'm done fighting myself. The person you were, the person you are, and the person you're becoming, they all deserve a seat at the same table. They all deserve understanding. And when you can look in the mirror and finally see all those versions together and feel love instead of resentment, that's when you know you've forgiven the reflection. It doesn't mean the pain never happened. It means it no longer controls you. It means you've chosen peace over punishment. And peace is what allows you to finally start living again. Words are strange things. They look so small, they sound so harmless, but they can carry the weight of entire worlds. We don't often realize how powerful they are, especially the ones we say to ourselves. Every thought, every quiet whisper in the back of your mind, every harsh sentence you've ever aimed at your own reflection. They don't just vanish, they leave marks, sometimes invisible, sometimes deep. You see, the way we talk to ourselves builds the framework for the life we live. If you wake up each morning and tell yourself you're not enough, your mind starts believing it. It shapes your choices, it affects your posture, your tone, your confidence, even the way you see others. It's like carrying a soundtrack in your head, and if that soundtrack keeps playing the same painful song, you begin to move in rhythm with it. There was a time in my life when my inner voice wasn't kind. I didn't even notice it first. It just became background noise. I'd make a small mistake, and that voice would whisper, "Of course you did." I'd try something new, and it would sneer, "Who do you think you are?" Over time, those little sentences became beliefs. I stopped trying certain things because I'd already decided I wasn't good enough, and no one ever said those words to me out loud. I did that. I said it to myself again and again until it became truth. That's the danger of our own words. We can turn them into weapons and not even realize we're the ones bleeding. But there's another side to that power, the healing side. When you start speaking kindly, when you start choosing gentler words, it's like you're retraining your brain to see light again. It's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about giving yourself room to grow, to make mistakes, and still feel worthy of love. I met a teacher once who had a rule for her students. They weren't allowed to say, "I can't." If they did, she'd make them finish the sentence with, "Yet. I can't do this, yet." She said it changed everything. The students began to approach challenges differently. Their language turned struggle into possibility. That single word, "yet," shifted their entire mindset from defeat to potential. That's what kind words do. They open doors. They create space for becoming. I think we forget sometimes that we are always listening to ourselves. The words you speak, even in silence, echo in the deepest corners of your being. When you tell yourself you're ugly, your body hears it. When you say you're useless, your dreams hear it. When you call yourself stupid, your future hears it. Words don't just describe your reality, they shape it. There's a study from Harvard that found that people who practice daily affirmations, simple positive self-talk, have lower stress, better focus, and even improved decision-making, not because they're magically transforming their lives overnight, but because they're changing the way they relate to themselves. Their brains begin to expect compassion instead of criticism. They stop flinching from their own reflection. When I learned that, I started noticing how harshly I talked to myself compared to how gently I spoke to others. I could forgive a friend for anything, but not myself. I could lift someone else up with words of hope, but my own inner dialogue was pure judgment, and it hit me. If I spoke to other people the way I spoke to myself, I'd be alone. So I made a choice. I decided to start small. Whenever I caught myself saying something cruel in my head, I'd pause and ask, would I say this to someone I love? And most of the time, the answer was no. So I changed the sentence. I started replacing "you're not good enough" with "you're still learning." Instead of "you always mess up," I'd say, "you're trying and that matters." At first it felt fake, like I was lying to myself. But kindness takes practice. Eventually, it started to feel natural. My inner voice began to sound more like a friend than a critic. And the strange thing is, when you start treating yourself with that kind of compassion, the world changes too, not because it actually changes, but because you do. You start walking differently. You look people in the eyes again. You stop apologizing for existing. And when you speak kindly to yourself, you start speaking kindly to others too. The love you give yourself becomes the love you give away. You might think your words don't matter that much, but think about it. How many times has something someone said to you stayed with you for years? Maybe it was a teacher who said you'd never make it. Maybe it was a parent who criticized instead of encouraged. Maybe it was someone who said you weren't enough. Those words didn't disappear. They shaped you. Now imagine how much your own words have shaped you too. All those little phrases said in frustration or habit have built the way you see yourself. But you can rewrite that story. You can start today with a single sentence that sounds like love instead of judgment. There's a story about a young man who used to write insults to himself on sticky notes, small reminders of his insecurities, and he'd put them on his mirror. One day his sister saw them. Instead of confronting him, she replaced them all with affirmations. You're enough. You're trying. You matter. The next morning, when he saw them, he laughed at first, but then he cried, 'cause deep down that's what he'd always needed to hear. A voice that believed in him even when he didn't. That voice can be yours. You can be your own reminder that you're allowed to be kind to yourself. That kindness isn't indulgence. It's strength. It's how you build resilience. Kindness doesn't mean you never hold yourself accountable. It means you hold yourself accountable with love. It means saying, yes, I made a mistake, but I'm still worthy of growth. It means understanding that shame is not a teacher, it's a trap. Growth comes from understanding, not self-punishment. If you want to change the way you see yourself, start with the words you use, the way you talk about your body, your worth, your effort. It all matters. You're planting seeds with every sentence, so choose ones that will grow into something beautiful. I know it's not easy. We're surrounded by noise that tells us we're never enough. Advertisements, expectations, social media, they all profit from your insecurity. But you don't have to buy into it. You can step out of that noise and create a quieter truth, one that says, I'm doing my best and means it. Sometimes you'll slip, you'll have bad days, you'll catch yourself being harsh again. That's okay, just notice it. Take a breath, try again. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Because awareness is where kindness begins. Imagine the life you could build if your inner voice became your biggest ally instead of your worst enemy. Imagine waking up and hearing, you've got this, you've come so far, you're allowed to rest, you're allowed to be happy. That's not wishful thinking. That's a choice you can make every single day. So speak kindly, not because it's easy, but because you deserve it. Because words leave marks, and the ones you give yourself will shape the rest of your life. The reflection in the mirror doesn't need to hear more criticism. It needs your encouragement. It needs your patience. It needs your voice saying, I see you, I believe in you, I love you. And the more often you say it, the more true it becomes. There's a quiet kind of power that comes from realizing you deserve love. Not someday, not when you've earned it, not when you've fixed all your flaws, but right now, exactly as you are. Most of us spend our lives waiting for that moment when we finally feel worthy. We tell ourselves, I'll love myself when I lose the weight, when I get the job, when I stop making mistakes. But that moment never comes because love doesn't grow in perfection. It grows in acceptance. Living like you deserve to be loved means showing up for yourself every single day, even when you don't feel like you've earned it. It means making choices that say, I matter. It's about eating when you're hungry, resting when you're tired, saying no when something hurts your peace, and yes when something nourishes your soul. It's not selfish, it's survival. I remember meeting a man once who spent his whole life chasing other people's approval. Everything he did, every word he said was designed to keep others happy. But when the lights went out and the noise faded, he realized he didn't even know who he was without their opinions. He said, I kept giving love away, hoping someone would give it back. But it doesn't work like that. You can't beg for the thing you're supposed to give yourself. When you start living like you deserve love, everything shifts. You begin to move differently. You stop tolerating what drains you. You start noticing what feels real. You begin to understand that love isn't something you need to earn. It's something you need to allow. It's already there, waiting for you to say yes. There's a moment in everyone's life when they realize that the way they treat themselves sets the tone for how others treat them. If you constantly put yourself last, the world will follow suit. But when you hold yourself with respect, when you stop apologizing for existing, people start meeting you at that level. The energy changes. You stop attracting chaos because you no longer confuse it for passion. You stop chasing people who make you question your worth because you've already answered that question for yourself. Living like you deserve love also means forgiving yourself for the times you didn't, for all the moments you accepted less than you deserved because you were scared of being alone, for the times you silenced your own needs just to keep someone else comfortable. You did what you knew how to do at the time. But now you know better. Now you can do better. You deserve to wake up without feeling like you have to prove yourself to anyone. You deserve peace in your own company. You deserve to speak softly to yourself when you fail, to celebrate when you grow, to believe you're allowed to be happy without earning it. You deserve love, not because you've done something grand, but because you're human, because you're here, because you exist. And maybe it starts small. Maybe it starts with looking in the mirror and deciding not to criticize yourself today. Maybe it starts with choosing people who make you feel calm instead of anxious. Maybe it starts with letting go of that one thing you keep pretending doesn't hurt you. These are acts of love too. The truth is, when you live like you deserve to be loved, you become a light for others. Your confidence doesn't come from ego, it comes from peace. People feel it when you walk into a room. You stop trying to take up less space, and instead you start existing fully. You start laughing louder, loving deeper, and trusting that even if everything else falls away, you'll still have yourself. You've spent enough time doubting your worth, enough time shrinking to make others comfortable, enough time waiting for permission to feel good about being who you are. You don't need that permission anymore. So take a deep breath, stand tall, treat yourself with the same tenderness you'd give someone you love unconditionally, because you deserve that love. You always have. And the moment you start living like it's true, the world starts reflecting it back to you. So tonight, or tomorrow morning, whenever it feels right, stand in front of that mirror, look past your doubts, past your flaws, past what the world told you to be, and say it out loud if you can. I love you, I'm proud of you, and I'm not giving up on you. Because the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with the person looking back. Fall in love with that person. They've been waiting for you all along.